I never thought our family Christmas would end with my in-laws crossing out my son's name from their precious family tree. But that's exactly what happened last December when my husband's parents decided my adopted son wasn't real family. They had no idea what storm they were about to unleash. The family tree incident was bad enough, but when my mother-in-law leaned over and whispered, "Maybe next year you'll bring a real grandchild," something inside me snapped. 10 years of trying to please these people, of swallowing their backhanded compliments and thinly veiled criticisms about my parenting, my career, my everything, it all came to a head in that moment. They had no clue about the secret I'd been keeping all these years, a secret that would shatter their perfect family image and change everything between us. By Christmas night, I had already made my decision. By New Year's Eve, they were at my doorstep, but not for the reasons you might expect. This is the story of how I finally stood up to the family that never accepted me or my son, and how one shocking revelation turned our family dynamics upside down forever. I met David during my second year of law school. He was brilliant, kind, and came from what I thought was the perfect family. The Prestons were New England blue bloods with a summer home in Cape Cod and a Maine residence in Connecticut that had been in their family for generations. His father, Richard, was a federal judge with political connections that stretched to Washington, and his mother, Eleanor, was the quintessential society matriarch who ran 3 different charitable foundations. From the moment David brought me home, Eleanor made it clear I wasn't what she had envisioned for her only son. I was from a middle-class family in Ohio, the daughter of a high school teacher and a nurse. How quaint, she'd say about my background, in that way that made quaint sound like unfortunate. Still, David and I married despite his parents' subtle disapproval. We settled in Boston, where I joined a corporate law firm, and David continued his work as an environmental engineer. We tried for years to have children, enduring 3 miscarriages before deciding to adopt. When we brought home Ethan, a beautiful 6-month-old boy, it was the happiest day of our lives. Eleanor's response to our adoption announcement was telling. "Well, I suppose this is one way to have a family," she said over the phone, her voice tight with disappointment. Richard was marginally warmer, sending a perfunctory card and savings bond. During Ethan's first Christmas at the Preston family home, Eleanor placed a silver frame of all her grandchildren on the mantel, except there was no photo of Ethan. When I pointed this out, she simply said, "Oh, I only have biological grandchildren up there." David confronted his mother, but she dismissed it as a misunderstanding. As Ethan grew, the slights continued. At family gatherings, Eleanor would lavish attention on her other grandchildren while barely acknowledging Ethan. Once, when Ethan was 5, he proudly showed Eleanor a drawing he'd made. She glanced at it and said, "That's nice, dear," before turning to her biological grandson and exclaiming over his similar artwork, "This is absolutely wonderful. You have real Preston talent." I saw Ethan's face fall, and something inside me hardened. But David always urged patience. "They're from a different generation," he'd say. "They'll come around." What neither the Prestons nor David knew was that I had discovered something years ago, purely by accident. I was helping Richard organize his home office during one visit when I came across documents relating to a paternity suit from the 1970s, before David was born. The papers clearly indicated that Richard had fathered a child with a law clerk and had paid a substantial settlement to keep it quiet. There was a birth certificate for a daughter named Marianne. I never told David. Some loyalty to him kept me from revealing his father's secret, even as his parents continued to treat Ethan as less than. But last Christmas, that would all change, and the grand family tree displayed in the Preston living room would become the catalyst. Last December marked our 10th Christmas with the Prestons. David had been pushing for us to stay at his parents' house instead of a hotel, insisting things were getting better. I reluctantly agreed, hoping that at 8 years old, Ethan might finally experience a warm Christmas with his grandparents. We arrived on December 23rd to find the house transformed into a winter wonderland. Eleanor had outdone herself with the decorations, garlands draped across the century-old banisters, antique ornaments adorning a 12-foot tree, and family heirlooms displayed throughout. The centerpiece of the living room was a new addition, an enormous, professionally designed family tree that traced the Prestons back 6 generations. "Isn't it magnificent?" Eleanor beamed, leading everyone to admire it. "I commissioned it for Richard's retirement from the bench. Every Preston is on there." I scanned the elaborate document, following the branches down to the present day. David's name was there, connected to mine, but beneath us, nothing. No Ethan. While my sister-in-law's 3 children were clearly marked, our son had been erased. David noticed it too and pulled his mother aside. I couldn't hear their conversation, but I saw Eleanor's dismissive wave and David's shoulders slump in defeat as he returned to me. "She says the genealogist only included biological descendants," he whispered. "She's ordered an amendment, but it won't arrive until after the holidays." "That's convenient," I replied, my voice tight with anger. That night, as we prepared for bed, David tried to rationalize his mother's behavior. "Mom's just old-fashioned. She doesn't mean to hurt anyone." "She knows exactly what she's doing," I countered. "This isn't about being old-fashioned. This is about her not accepting our son." The next day, Christmas Eve, the entire Preston clan gathered. David's sister Catherine arrived with her husband and their 3 children, all of whom Eleanor doted on excessively. Richard's brother James came with his wife and their adult children, plus grandchildren. The house buzzed with activity, laughter, and reminiscing, none of which seemed to include us. During dinner, Eleanor announced a new Preston family tradition. Each grandchild would receive a special gift representing their Preston heritage. One by one, she called up Catherine's children, presenting them with family heirlooms, a pocket watch that belonged to their great-grandfather, a cameo that was their great-great-grandmother's, and a first-edition book from Richard's grandfather's collection. When all 3 had received their gifts, Eleanor sat down, clearly finished with the presentations. The omission hung in the air like a physical presence. Ethan, sitting beside me, looked around in confusion. "Grandma," he said in his clear, innocent voice, "did you forget me?" The table fell silent. Eleanor's smile became fixed. "Oh, these are family heirlooms, dear. They're passed down through blood." I felt Ethan stiffen beside me. At 8 years old, he understood exactly what she meant. Before I could respond, Richard cleared his throat and announced it was time for dessert, effectively ending the conversation. As the evening continued, I watched Ethan grow quieter, withdrawing into himself. Later, as the children played in the den and the adults gathered for drinks in the living room, I overheard Eleanor speaking to her sister-in-law. "Of course we love the boy," she was saying, "but you understand the difference. The Preston name means something. Bloodlines matter." I slipped away, finding David in the kitchen. "I want to leave tomorrow," I told him, first thing. "It's Christmas," he protested. "We can't just—" "Your mother deliberately humiliated our son," I said, my voice shaking. "She excluded him from the family tree and publicly denied him an heirloom because he's not a blood Preston." David ran a hand through his hair. "I'll talk to her again." "That's your answer to everything, and nothing ever changes," I snapped. But worse was yet to come. On Christmas morning, as presents were distributed, I noticed Eleanor giving the other grandchildren envelopes that they excitedly opened to find substantial checks, their annual contribution to their college funds. When Ethan received no envelope, I saw him looking at his cousin's gifts with confusion. "Mom," David said quietly to Eleanor, "where's Ethan's college fund check?" Eleanor sipped her eggnog before responding, "Richard and I have decided that, since you adopted him, his education should be your responsibility entirely. We're focusing our educational gifts on continuing the Preston legacy." Something in me broke. 10 years of restraint, of hoping things would change, shattered in that moment. I stood up abruptly. "Ethan," I called to my son, "come help me get something from our room." As we headed upstairs, I made my decision. The secret I'd kept for a decade would remain hidden no longer. When Ethan and I returned downstairs, the family had moved to the living room where Richard was making his annual Christmas toast. He stood beneath the elaborate family tree, champagne glass in hand, waxing poetic about Preston heritage and the importance of family bonds. "For over 200 years, Preston blood has produced leaders, innovators, and pillars of society," he was saying. "Looking at our grandchildren, I see that tradition continuing." I felt Ethan's small hand tighten in mine. The room was warm, filled with the Preston family in their Christmas finery, all focused on Richard's speech. "Excuse me," I said, my voice cutting through Richard's monologue. The room fell silent, all eyes turning to me. "I believe I have something to add to this discussion of Preston heritage and bloodlines." David shot me a questioning look, but I was beyond stopping now. "For 10 years, I've watched you belittle and exclude my son because he doesn't share your precious Preston DNA," I said, looking directly at Eleanor and Richard. "You've made it abundantly clear that without Preston blood, he doesn't count as family." Eleanor straightened in her chair. "Jennifer, this is hardly the time." "Actually, it's exactly the time," I continued, my voice steady despite my racing heart. "Because if Preston bloodlines are what matter most, then there's something everyone here should know." I walked to the family tree, standing beside Richard. "This beautiful family history isn't quite complete. There's a branch missing." The room was so quiet you could hear the crackling of the fire. "Richard, would you like to tell everyone about Marianne, or shall I?" The color drained from Richard's face. Eleanor looked between us, confusion replacing her usual composure. "Jennifer," David stepped forward, "what are you talking about?" I turned to face the entire family. 10 years ago, I found documents in Richard's office, a paternity suit he settled in 1978. He fathered a daughter named Marianne with a law clerk named Susan Hargrove, paid a substantial amount to keep it quiet. Gasps echoed around the room. Eleanor's hand flew to her throat. "So, if we're being technical about bloodlines and who deserves to be on this family tree," I continued, pointing to the elaborate document, "there's a whole branch missing. David has a half-sister somewhere, and possibly nieces and nephews who carry that precious Preston DNA." Richard's face had turned ashen. "This is outrageous." "Is it?" I cut him off, pulling a folded paper from my pocket, a copy of the birth certificate I'd made years ago. "Born April 12, 1979. Marian Susan Hargrove. Father, Richard Preston." The document trembled in my hand as I held it up. "I kept your secret for 10 years while you rejected my son, but if this family is only about blood, then let's be thorough about whose blood counts." Eleanor rose from her chair, shaking. "Richard, is this true?" The look that passed between them confirmed everything before Richard could speak. I turned to Ethan, who was watching with wide eyes. "Come on, sweetheart, we're leaving." "Jennifer, wait," David called after me. I paused at the doorway, turning back to the stunned family gathered beneath their precious family tree. Blood doesn't make a family. Love does, something none of you seem to understand. Then I took my son's hand and we walked out, leaving the Prestons to deal with the shattered remnants of their perfect family image. Outside, as snow began to fall, David caught up with us at the car. "You can't just leave," he said, his voice a mix of shock and anger. "Watch me," I replied, helping Ethan into the back seat. "Either you come with us now or you stay with your family. Your choice." The look on David's face told me everything I needed to know about where we stood. The 3-hour drive back to Boston was mostly silent. Ethan fell asleep in the back seat while David gripped the steering wheel, his knuckles white. "You had no right," he finally said as we crossed into Massachusetts. "That wasn't your secret to tell." "And they had no right to treat our son the way they did," I replied. "I kept that secret for 10 years, David. 10 years of watching them exclude Ethan while you made excuses for them." By the time we reached home, David had moved from anger to contemplation. "Did you ever try to find her?" he asked quietly as we carried our bags inside. "My sister." "No," I admitted. "It wasn't my place." The week between Christmas and New Year's was tense. David oscillated between anger at me for the revelation and anger at his parents for their decades of deception. He fielded calls from his sister Catherine, who was equally shocked by the news. Richard hadn't denied anything once the initial confrontation passed. Apparently, after the party broke up, Mom went through Dad's office and found the original documents, David told me after one such call. There were years of correspondence, birthday cards he'd never sent, school reports, even recent photos. He'd been keeping tabs on her all this time. I watched as David struggled with this new reality. "I have a sister," he would murmur occasionally, as if testing the words. 3 days after Christmas, the doorbell rang. I opened it to find Eleanor standing alone on our porch, looking smaller and older than I'd ever seen her. "May I come in?" she asked, her usual imperious tone replaced by something close to humility. I hesitated, then stepped aside. Eleanor entered our home, removing her coat and gloves with mechanical precision. "Is Ethan here?" she asked. "He's upstairs, playing," I answered cautiously. Eleanor nodded, then straightened her shoulders. "I owe you both an apology. What I said, what we did, was unforgivable." David entered from the kitchen, surprise registering on his face at the sight of his mother. "Mom, where's Dad?" "Your father is speaking with his lawyer," Eleanor replied, her voice tight. "And with Susan Hargrove. After you left, I insisted he make things right." She turned to me. "What you did was painful, Jennifer, but necessary. I've spent the past 40 years living in a careful fiction, convincing myself that Richard's indiscretion was buried in the past. Meanwhile, I projected all my anger and resentment onto Ethan, an innocent child." Tears welled in her eyes. "I couldn't accept him because accepting him meant acknowledging that family isn't just about bloodlines. And if that's true, then Richard's daughter should have been acknowledged too." David moved to his mother's side. "Have you met her? My sister?" Eleanor shook her head. "Not yet, but she's agreed to meet us. She's known about Richard her entire life. Her mother told her the truth when she was 18. She's married now with 2 children of her own, your niece and nephew." The revelation hung in the air between us. "I came here today to ask if you'd all be willing to join us for New Year's Eve," Eleanor continued. "Marianne and her family have agreed to come to the house. It's time we become a complete family." I exchanged a look with David. "I don't know if that's—" "Please," Eleanor interrupted, looking directly at me. "I need to make this right. With everyone." That evening, after Eleanor left, David and I had a long, honest conversation, the kind we should have had years ago. "I failed you both," he admitted. "I kept hoping they'd change instead of standing up for my family, for you and Ethan." On New Year's Eve, we returned to the Preston home with cautious optimism. The atmosphere was entirely different from Christmas. Gone was the forced festivity, replaced by nervous anticipation. When Marianne arrived with her husband and children, the resemblance between her and David was unmistakable. The same eyes, the same smile. Richard, usually so composed, broke down at the sight of her. Later that evening, I found Eleanor in the living room, standing before the family tree. "I've commissioned a new one," she told me without turning around. "A complete one, with all our family members." She faced me then, her expression earnest. "Including Ethan," prominently. I nodded, not quite ready to forgive, but willing to acknowledge the effort. The most surprising transformation came from Richard. After a private conversation with Marianne, he emerged looking lighter somehow, unburdened. He sought out Ethan, who was playing with his newly discovered cousins, and asked if he could join them. Before midnight, Richard gathered everyone in the living room. He formally introduced Marianne to the extended family, acknowledging her as his daughter and apologizing for the years of secrecy. Then, unexpectedly, he turned to Ethan. "I also want to apologize to my grandson," he said, his voice thick with emotion. "Blood doesn't make a family. Love does. And it's time I showed you the love you deserve." From his pocket, he produced a small box. Inside was an antique compass that had belonged to the first Preston to settle in New England. "This has always gone to the eldest grandchild," Richard explained, placing it in Ethan's hands. "That's you." As the new year dawned, I watched Ethan playing with his cousins, all of his cousins, while David and Marianne talked quietly in a corner, beginning to forge the sibling relationship they'd been denied. Eleanor approached me with 2 glasses of champagne. "I know it won't be easy to forgive us," she said, offering me a glass, "but I hope you'll give us the chance to be the grandparents Ethan deserves." I accepted the champagne, making no promises, but leaving the door open. Sometimes family is formed through blood, sometimes through law, and sometimes through the simple yet profound act of choosing each other, despite everything. It's been almost a year since that New Year's Eve revelation changed everything. Our family isn't perfect. We're still navigating this new reality with its complicated emotions and shared history. Eleanor has become a devoted grandmother to Ethan, making up for lost time with genuine interest in his life. Richard and Marianne have developed a relationship built on honesty and forgiveness, and David has embraced his role as a protective father and supportive brother. As for me, I've learned that sometimes keeping secrets only prolongs pain, while the truth, however difficult, can ultimately heal. The new family tree now hangs in our home in Boston, complete with every branch, every name, representing not just bloodlines, but the complicated, messy, beautiful connections that truly make a family. If there's one thing I've learned through all of this, it's that family isn't defined by DNA or documents. It's defined by the people who stand by you, who fight for you, and who love you unconditionally. I hope my story resonates with some of you out there. If you're struggling with family acceptance or dealing with painful secrets, know that you're not alone. Sometimes the hardest conversations lead to the most meaningful transformations. If you found value in my story, please hit the like button and subscribe to the channel for more real-life experiences. Share in the comments if you've gone through something similar. Your story might help someone else who's struggling right now. Thanks for listening, and remember, you deserve to be part of a family that celebrates all of who you are.